And hello again, everyone. My name is Jeff Morris, and I am the Community Development Associate with the URA. And I'm joined today by my colleagues Talia O'Brien and Auster Teclay. And I just wanted to welcome you and thank you for joining us for our Avenues of Hope American Rescue Plan Grant Program presentation. And we hope that you get a lot out of it. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We are participants, everyone is going to be muted until the question and answer session at the very end, where you'll have a chance to ask questions, and you can also make comments in the chat throughout the course of the presentation. And as I mentioned before, this is being recorded, so that process has already started. Our agenda today, this is our welcome kickoff, and then we're going to be moving into talking about our Avenues of Hope initiative overview. After that, we are going to talk about the Avenues of Hope, AOH for short, American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA for short, program overview. And then we are going to move into talking about sort of the eligible projects and activities under this grant. After that, we're going to describe some of the program details, followed by the program schedule, and then we'll leave some time for question and answer session after that. So that is the overview of today's presentation. And with that, I'm going to kick it off to my colleague, Auster Teclay.
Thank you. Just again, a reminder for housekeeping. I know some folks just entered the chat. Questions and answers will be at the end. If you have any comments, feel free to engage in the chat. We are taking note of what's going on in the chat, so at the end we can revisit that. And of course, as we mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. All right, so thank you to everyone being here on this snowy Tuesday. So we are very appreciative of your time and being here. So just to start off, this grant program is actually a part of our larger Avenues of Hope initiative. For those of you who may not be aware, the Avenues of Hope program kicked off about 2 years ago, and it's a holistic model for rebuilding Pittsburgh's Black and disinvested main streets. The concept of Avenues of Hope really focuses on a place-based, people-first approach that intervenes across all layers of successful, healthy, and sustainable Main Street development. Well, what does that mean? We have programs here at the URA that really look at the system in totality and thinks about, all the different things that go into reinvesting into a community, whether it be lending or from technical assistance, or just being a connector within the community to different organizations. So we understood that, simply having 1 or 2 programs doesn't really address the entire issue. This grant program is kind of addressing the capital, the lack of capital that's often in communities, but it does play into the larger programming that the URA provides. So though this particular presentation is about the ARPA grant program, there are a lot of other programs within the URA that play well with this and pair and layer well with this program. So it addresses the different barriers and obstacles that have historically provide challenges for Main Street development in these communities. You can actually go to the next slide. So this is a better slide to kind of explain. So the Avenues of Hope are 7 corridors. If you notice, there are 7 geographically disparate neighborhoods. So they're all across the city. Perrysville Avenue on the north side. So that's north and south. So if you notice in this picture, it's kind of those 2 blobs there. Larmer Avenue in East Liberty, Homewood Avenue, 2nd Avenue, Warrington and Brownsville, which is on in the south side, Center Avenue, and then of course the entire Chartiers Avenue 3-mile strip. If you can kind of look at the overlay map to your left, and it is an overlay of just different programs that work well with these avenues. It includes federal opportunity zones, enterprise zones. It also shows you which council district, and of course just the neighborhoods themselves. So the idea is that we chose, along with the city and the mayor, 7 very different neighborhoods throughout the city of Pittsburgh that we strategically focused a number of different resources. This particular resource that we're talking today about is the ARPA grant program, American Rescue Plan grant program. Next slide. And of course, I mentioned the two main pillars of this initiative, Avenues of Hope, which the ARPA grant program is a part of, is place-based and people first. So the place-based is the idea that we are strategically focusing on certain locations within the city, the 7 corridors as outlined. For this particular grant, not only is the corridor itself eligible, projects along the corridor, but projects within the neighborhood boundary. And so that neighborhood versus corridor conversation, can get a little bit tricky. So we always say, if you aren't sure if your project is geographically located within a corridor within the neighborhood boundary, just let us know the address and we'll work with you to confirm if it meets the criteria. The second is people-based. The whole point is that we really want strong, robust communities. And a huge part of that is having entrepreneurial support and entrepreneurs, particularly from the community, if possible, to really bring life back into these neighborhoods. Some of those pillars not only are entrepreneurial support, micro-lending, and minority business recovery and growth. Next slide. So when we say a holistic and sustained engagement, I know that sounds this kind of very lofty and kind of pie in the sky, I believe is the term. But at the base of it is looking at small ways in which we can intervene in the system to help these projects come into fruition. Because as you know, development is Main Street development in particular is complicated and challenging. And we really looked at the different barriers and how we can support this type of development, particularly in neighborhoods that haven't had as many opportunities. So we looked at financing. Avenues of Hope really looked at the struggles in finding financing for smaller projects or first-time developers or entrepreneurs who wanted to own property and own the buildings that they're selling in, for example. And the ARPA grant is a tool of that. When we think about strategic site assemblage, how do we look at the different parcels that are in a neighborhood that are just kind of sitting vacant, and how do we strategically find those parcels and activate them, whether it's with a building or with a green space, just making sure they're just not sitting there. Another is, housing. A lot of components, big component of making a healthy Main Street is having accessible and affordable housing. So that, when you're thinking about the Main Street, and yes, it's great to have all of these businesses, well, are there people that live nearby that can actually access them? And also thinking about small business support. So as I mentioned, the URA also has a lot of really helpful programs that pair well with this grant program, whether that be small business technical assistance, referring you to one of our program partners, or another lending program that you can use in addition to the grant to maybe support a larger project. So this is what we mean by that holistic and sustained engagement. So you might start in one corner and saying, hey, I'm interested in this grant, but you might end up as a client with a loan, or might come back a year or two later and say, hey, I would like some technical assistance. So we look at it as a circle of holistic support and sustained engagement long-term, as opposed to just kind of a one and done interaction. Next slide. And just to kind of give some insight, if folks are not familiar with some of the things that we're already doing within the URA, some of the tools and tactics we used are, affordable commercial spaces, business services and support, and filling storefronts. We have other programs that pair well that specifically deal with filling storefronts, providing support to support affordable commercial spaces, public space improvement, and cross-sector coordination. So we've, if you're working on a project and we're trying to, you're working with city planning or working with Department of Mobility, we really try and make sure that we're supporting you along the way, and really making sure that we're communicating frequently with those departments so these projects are moving forward.
There, really quickly, can you indicate which portion of 2nd Avenue? There's a question about it being very long, but can you indicate which portion of 2nd Avenue?
Irvine Street. So the majority is on Irvine Street, and we can, if you have a specific question about an address, just let us know, because even though it is 2nd Avenue, if it's we have kind of a neighborhood boundary around the corridor. So even if it's not exactly on Irvine Street, maybe it's parallel or perpendicular to it, it still could be in the overall neighborhood boundary. So if you have a question about whether a project is eligible or not, we suggest providing the address, and we can go ahead and check that to ensure that if it's eligible or not. Next slide. All right. I think now we will, I'll hand this over to my colleague Talia O'Brien.
Thanks, Esther, for that additional context and background on the Avenues of Hope initiative. It's important to understand the initiative as a whole when we're thinking through potential project ideas for this grant program and how they relate to the overarching goals of the Avenues of Hope initiative. So my name is Talia O'Brien, and I apologize in advance for being off camera. I'm having some internet connectivity issues, so hopefully we'll be good if I just stay off camera. So we're going to transition now into the overall Avenues of Hope initiative into the details of the ARPA grant program for Avenues of Hope communities. The Avenues of Hope ARPA grant program is funded through a $7 million portion of the URA's American Rescue Plan Act funding allocation received from the city of Pittsburgh. ARPA is a federally funded program that was dispersed throughout the country to provide aid in recovering from COVID-19 pandemic hardships. As we all know, many people are still suffering from the challenges born out of the pandemic. This grant program is made to help support COVID-19 recovery on a neighborhood scale. Of the $7 million, each Avenues of Hope corridor has been allocated $1 million from the city's overall ARPA allocation. This grant program, along with other Avenues of Hope specific programs, are funded through that $1 million per corridor. Applications will be awarded quarterly until funds are depleted for each corridor. However, it's important to note that while the grant program has rolling quarterly deadlines, the funding for each corridor is first come, first serve. So this means that your corridor could deplete funding quicker than others if several projects are awarded funding during an earlier award cycle. So in other words, if you're able to, don't delay and submit your application as early as you can for the best chance of receiving funding. Next slide, please. The Avenues of Hope ARPA program will provide funding for place-based initiatives within the 7 Avenues of Hope communities that Esther just went over to spur revitalization within commercial corridors. The goals of the grant program include improving the quality of life in neighborhoods through health outcomes and economic opportunity, supporting COVID-19 pandemic hardship recovery, and investing in Pittsburgh's Black and disinvested main streets. The grant is divided into 2 tiers with a maximum grant request of $200,000, and we'll talk more on the tier specifics and matching requirements later on in the presentation. Additionally, unlike other URA grant programs, the Avenues of Hope ARPA grant will not strictly be a reimbursement grant. In an effort to keep the funding opportunity low barrier to folks, we are able to provide a portion of the awarded grant amount upfront, which will be based on project readiness and need. Eligible applicants for the grant program include Avenues of Hope-based nonprofits, community development corporations, business district organizations, small businesses, individuals such as business owners and property owners, and partnering private entities. Please note that owner occupancy for this grant is not required. However, approval of tenant-initiated projects will be contingent upon the property owner's written agreement to adhere to the program requirements. If this pertains to your project, this document should be included within your grant application as a supporting material. Next slide. So now we're going to move into the eligible projects and activities section, where we'll go over the eligible project categories first, and then discuss eligible activities that fall within each category. Since this grant program is federally funded, the use of these funds must be compliant with federal ARPA requirements as well. We worked in tandem with the City of Pittsburgh's legal department to create a list of eligible activities for the grant program. If you have any question or doubt about your project's eligibility, like we said earlier, please reach out and we'll be happy to discuss the project scope and work internally to get you an eligibility determination within a reasonable time frame so you can submit an application. Eligible categories for the program include projects that assist in the revitalization of commercial corridors that were impacted by the pandemic, improvements to vacant and/or abandoned commercial spaces or public infrastructure, commercial corridor support for recovery of COVID-19 pandemic hardships, and projects that invest in neighborhoods to improve health and safety outcomes, specifically through the creation or improvement of parks and open spaces within or near the commercial corridor. Now we'll talk about the specific activities that these categories include. Next slide. Okay, great. So some eligible activities based on the categories that we just discussed. So under vacant, blighted, and underutilized property reclamation and stewardship that improves community safety, that can look like rehabilitation and renovation of commercial spaces or vacant properties, greening or cleaning or other cleanup of vacant lots, maintenance, demolition, or deconstruction of vacant or abandoned buildings, including residential, commercial, or industrial, paired with a greening and other lot cleanup. Costs associated with acquiring and securing the legal title of vacant and abandoned properties, and other costs to position the property for current or future productive use. With public space and neighborhood infrastructure improvements that enhance health and safety outcomes, that can look like the creation or improvement of parks and open spaces within or near the commercial corridor, or streetscapes improvements as well. Next slide. Small business support is, of course, an eligible activity, and that can come in the form of technical assistance to assist with business planning needs, such as small business counseling, business incubators, or online presence for commercial and marketing, financial or transportation to support for operating micro businesses, rehabilitation of commercial properties, which includes storefront and facade improvements. Lastly, we have COVID-19 recovery relief, which can look different in a variety of ways for folks. It can include assistance for businesses that were in the startup or expansion phase in early 2020, but faced delays due to the pandemic hardships. Operation and maintenance of existing equipment and facilities in the form of rent assistance, leases, and utilities to mitigate financial hardship suffered. Program adaptation to fit into changing COVID-19 standards, so moving to outdoor and online venues and adapting existing programs. Upgrades to interior spaces to mitigate the spread of COVID-19, including HVAC system upgrades, kitchen and bathroom renovations, and additional costs associated with COVID-19 mitigation tactics. Next slide. I'm briefly going to go through a list of ineligible activities that are kind of standard across the URA for grant programs. Projects not located within the city of Pittsburgh are ineligible. Projects not located within the boundaries of the Avenues of Hope corridors. And I do want to make the corridor boundaries clear, as Austera already talked about. And we receive a lot of inquiries from folks with project ideas that are nearby, but not directly located on the avenues themselves. And on our website, you can view maps of each Avenues of Hope corridor. And on those the interactive maps, they show a focus area and an impact area. The avenues themselves are considered the focus area, and the radius around them is roughly 1/4 of a mile in all directions. That area is considered the impact area. Both areas are eligible to apply. However, projects located within the impact area or outside of the impact area will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis as per the needs of the community. And also projects that are located within the residential areas that are adjacent to the business district corridors will also be considered. So later on in the presentation, I'm going to walk through the website and kind of how to navigate that. And you'll see where you can view those interactive maps. And again, if there's any question about location eligibility, you can always reach out to us with the address and we can get back to you on that if the maps are hard to read. So moving on, residential projects that have no commercial component that are not part of mixed use development are ineligible. Improvements or projects that are proposed to occur within a city right of way that have not been coordinated with and approved by the city of Pittsburgh. improvements or projects that do not have site control of the proposed property, projects that do not align with federal ARPA final rules, and any project which the URA believes will not be able to expend the program funds by the timeline of December 31st, 2026. Next slide. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, the grant is structured into 2 tiers. Tier 1 grants will award up to $50,000 with no matching requirement, while Tier 2 grants will award anything over $50,001 and will have a cash equity matching requirement of 10% of the total project cost. Applicants, excluding private entities, may use prior investments and services to cover up to half of the 10% match, and in-kind services that take place over the grant contract period will also be accepted towards the 10% match requirement. Any funding from the URA and city sources, that actually is considered an eligible use of match funding for this grant program as well. Next slide. So the Avenues of Hope ARPA grant program features a 2-part review process that differs from other existing URA grant programs. To best address the needs of each Avenues of Hope corridor individually, we implemented a new evaluation structure for the grant program, which is comprised of the community advisory committees and a URA review committee. So what this process will look like is when applications are received, internal URA staff will screen the applications for general eligibility and prepare project information to give to the community advisory committees for review. Once the community advisory committees meet, they will review the project applications received and make preliminary funding recommendations to the URA that will be based on determining community impact and alignment. So these community advisory committees are being finalized. It should be finalized by the end of this month, and will be comprised of corresponding neighborhood community group representatives, community leaders, business owners, a few URA representatives, and other city agencies. So once the community advisory committees have their preliminary project recommendations finalized, applications are then reviewed by, then get passed to the URA review committee. So the URA review committee will work with city law and the Office of Management and Budget and others to confirm that all the projects are indeed ARPA eligible, and review preliminary project recommendations from the community advisory committees, and ultimately will make funding recommendations to the URA board of directors, who will have the final say in awarding funding. So we implemented this structure to we know that all of the Avenues of Hope communities are in different stages of development and need to be looked at through a community lens, as well as like the internal development lens. So we thought that this would be a good opportunity for folks to have a look on the ground level of the applications that are received, and have the opportunity to provide feedback and gauge what they think would be most impactful for the community, and have more of a hand in the development opportunities and where they live. Next slide. Okay, as we talked about a few times with this grant program being federally funded, we're taking additional steps in the tracking and reporting of all of the ARPA funding that's spent throughout the organization. So how that relates to the ARPA grant program, awardees will be required to complete monthly project reports and to attend quarterly check-in meetings with their URA grant manager. This is to ensure appropriate use of funds and just, help keep the project moving forward. Prior to contract execution, benchmarks will be set with each awardee to determine a fund disbursement schedule that aligns with the project timeline. An example of this would be if an awardee receives a $100,000 grant, say $50,000 will be dispersed in September to purchase materials, Another installment of $25,000 will be dispersed in November for contractor payments, and the remaining $25,000 would be dispersed in May for landscaping costs. So we'll work with folks to determine a timeline that makes sense and that's attainable, instead of offering a lump sum all at once for the grant program or for the grant award, just to keep it on track. And we will be flexible with folks, depending. We understand that all the projects will likely be different. So lastly, additionally, because of a portion of the grant being available upfront, purchases that will be made with the grant funding must be screened for eligibility and approved by the URA grant manager before the funds are dispersed and spent. So again, just making sure that there's appropriate use of funds. We know that that could happen by accident, but just as another fail-safe, and make sure that they're being spent appropriately and tracked sufficiently. Next slide. Okay, so applications for the grant program can be submitted in two formats, either through Google Forms or a fillable PDF application. Applicants must have a Google account to upload supporting materials through the Google Forms format. So for applicants without a Google account, you can apply through the fillable PDF and submit it either directly via email or through the document upload portal on the Avenues of Hope ARPA webpage. Both application formats are available on the webpage, which we'll go through in just a moment here, as well as templates for supporting application materials. We have a template on there for an itemized project budget, which should be submitted with each grant application submitted, as well as a project scope guide that kind of outlines what we're looking for in the project information section of your grant application, and is meant to guide the way that you think through the project and how to formulate that in the grant application. Technical assistance for submitting applications is available upon request. We're working with a few technical assistance providers, and they can help with thinking through project scopes, help you create the project budget, and just get the project in a good spot and ready to submit. Next slide, please. Okay, and you can keep going. Great. Okay, so I know from my experience working at the URA that a lot of folks have difficulty navigating our website, myself included. There's a lot of really great, useful content on there. So I just wanted to start at square one. We'll go the long way to getting to the Avenues of Hope American Rescue Plan Act webpage and how to submit an application. But think of it as enjoying the ride to get there, and kind of knowing how to navigate it more to find useful information and a lot of the programs that Auster mentioned earlier that can be paired nicely with this program and how to access those resources. So starting at step one, just go to the URA website, ura.org, and then we're gonna hover over the impact icon at the top, and that drops down a drop-down menu, and we're going to select the Avenues of Hope initiative, which in the next slide you'll see opens the Avenues of Hope initiative landing page. So we can go ahead and move forward. Okay, so on the right-hand side, you'll see the landing page for the overall initiative. Here's where you can find all of the information on the initiative here, including different resources and Avenues of Hope specific programs, the interactive corridor maps that we talked about earlier, and news and a bunch of useful stuff that's updated frequently. If you keep scrolling down that landing page, you will eventually come to a section that reads the Avenues of Hope programs. We're on step 3. And then step 4, we're gonna select the Avenues of Hope ARPA grant program. So we're moving moving through this orientation like we're applying for the grant, but I do encourage you all to check out the different products that the Avenues of Hope initiative offers as well. Okay, so you can move ahead to the next slide. So once you select the Avenues of Hope ARPA grant program, it brings you to the web page where you can find all of the information that we talked about tonight, including the program guidelines, the grant application forms, corresponding materials, the grant application upload portal, and a program timeline. If you want to take the short route and just get directly to this web page, you can hit the magnifying glass, the search bar on the URA's website, and just type in AOH ARPA, and should be the, one of the first things that pop up. They'll take you directly here. So if you scroll down on the web page, you'll reach a how to apply section, and there you'll see all of the program materials listed in clickable link format. So step 6 will select either application format that you're choosing to use, and that will access the grant application. Next slide. Oh, go back one. Thank you. Okay, so here you can see the 2 different application formats. The left-hand side will be the fillable PDF application and the Google Forms on the other. So you're going to go ahead and start filling in that information. And now we can move ahead. And this is step 7B, because when we're filling out, working on filling out and completing your grant application, you want to refer to the project information guide when completing the project information section of your grant application. And this is the guide that I mentioned earlier that covers kind of like guiding you of how to create your project scope and the details that we're going to be looking for in applications. Again, that's available. You can download it as a PDF under the program materials section on the website, as well as the itemized budget template that is also in the same section. This is an Excel spreadsheet, and it will include 2 tabs. First is a blank template, which you see here on the screen. And we also have an example of a completed project budget to help you visualize it more. And if there's confusion on the instructions, it's a good idea to have something to base your project off of. So all of the grant applications should include an itemized project budget. Please use this template and clearly define and mark where the matching funds will be coming from within the budget. Next slide. Okay, last step is to upload the grant application and all of the supporting materials. If you're using a Google form, it's very convenient because you can just upload everything right into the application, and it will save directly to Google. So we'll have all that information in one step. If you're using the fillable PDF application format, you have 2 options. You can either email directly to the AOH grant email address. You can send your all supporting materials in the application that way. Or on the AOH ARPA webpage, there is this program application document upload. So it's at the bottom of the webpage, and you'll be able to choose all of the files for the supporting materials and upload it that way. So either way, we don't have a preference, whatever's easiest for you. If you're, of course, need additional support, you could always reach out and we'll make sure that we have everything that we need for your application. All right, next slide. And to close us out, I'm just going to quickly go through the Avenues of Hope ARPA timeline. So applications are accepted on a rolling basis. We're in Q1 right now. So the first round of applications are due April 30th. And the next quarter will begin accepting applications on May 1st and so forth. Next slide. And we really just want to drive home this point of please read the guidelines, read the guidelines again, and also follow the guidelines. We are here for to answer any questions that you may have about eligibility, about project scopes. And as like we said earlier, we do have technical assistance available with some providers that can help you with the application. So if you feel like you're struggling and just want some additional support or feedback, please do reach out and we will connect you with the right folks to help you out on that. Next slide. So I've included all of our contact information. We'll make sure to get the slide deck out to you folks so you have all this information easy to access. And I think on that note, we should be wrapping up to the question and answers portion of the webinar.
So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording. So bear with me as I do that.